I grew up in Wooster, as Pam did. We were in the same class together at Wooster High School, sensational class of 1970. And I'm really honored to introduce a person whose courage and humility I find to be inspiring. And Pam spoke to my first aid CPR class last spring. And as she was speaking to them, I wondered if really very many people could do some of the things that she has done. And Pam's dedication and love of others as a volunteer is something I think you'll find obvious as she speaks to us this evening. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Pam Sprosty from Wooster. What do you say? Good to see you.
Yeah. Good evening, afternoon, or whatever it is, all of us. Boy, it's a real good idea to have a couple martinis before you do something like this. Takes the edge off. No, I'm kidding. Being serious just for a second now, I just want to start by saying that whatever our contribution I made down at Ground Zero is absolutely minuscule to what others have done. I spent 3 weeks down there, but what the firemen have gone through, the other EMTs, people off the street that were just in the bucket brigade as well as myself, and they spent months down there. My hat is off to them. I could never be even close to what these other people have done. I'll get into it a little bit later, but the state of New York and my ambulance corps somehow gave me it was a little bit wrong in the paper, the New York State Congressional Medal of Valor. Medal of Honor goes to military people, but civilians get the Medal of Valor. I don't think I deserved it. It's sure nice to look at, but there are so many other people that did so much more than I did. I'll just give you a little background of what I did down there and how I started out. Everybody down there now has some medical problems, even if you're down there just for a couple minutes or a couple weeks or a couple months. It didn't make any difference. We didn't have any masks for the first couple of days other than what we had in our ambulances, which is just what the surgeon wears in surgery. Dr. Weckesser, nothing much more than what you wore when you filled my 2 teeth and the fillings are still there. Unfortunately, because of all that, all the dogs that were down there were dead after 4 years. Their noses are right down on the ground looking for live people. And after about 4 years, they started to get tumors, and they all passed away, whether it was a lung condition or a brain condition. That's mostly where the problems were. Many of my friends, the EMTs and the firemen back there, have brain tumors, they have other cancers, they have lung problems, and who knows what else is going to happen, because it's been a while, but it hasn't been that long. Most of us are still alive. There is a government program that I was fortunate enough to sign up for. It's not that we get 3 things from the government, not at all, but if we could sign up for this program or volunteer to sign up for the program, the government would tell us how often we needed to see what doctors. They put us through a bank of tests, x-rays, CAT scans, blood work, urine, everything you could think of, as well as psychology. 99% of us have PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. A lot of people have tumors, like I said, and every 3 or 4 months we are to see certain doctors for whatever problems that we may have or they have found. And as long as we follow their protocol, they will pay for the medication and whatever treatment we need. Now that I'm living out here and not in New York anymore, there's a company called Logistics Health International, and they are actually based in Wisconsin, but they told me what doctors around here that I could see at the Cleveland Clinic or here at Wooster, and I do have some chronic sinus problems. Every 2 days it seems like I've got sinus problems, which unfortunately has turned into, I just blanked out, MRSA. but believe it or not, we probably all have MRSA, you just don't know about it. I have some nodules on my lungs. Fortunately, I do have a tumor in my brain, but it's a fatty tumor. And how many times do you have your brain scanned? You know, it could be, we all have them, we don't know. But so far, so good. The lungs not so good, but everything else is, I'm going along with schedule. A little bit about myself before I get into what was going on down there. I grew up here in Wooster, Ohio, just down the street from Tom. Dr. Weckeser was my dentist. And yes, I do still have the fillings. I spent my summers like a normal kid. Not really. I worked at the fairs ever since I was 10 years old. 10 years old all the way through college. I don't know if anybody knows Dave and Lois Gallipu or knows that name. Okay, they're my godparents. So at 10 years old, I started working the fairs, cotton candy girl. And that helped with school. After high school, I went to the College of Wooster. Probably the best 5.5 years of my life. No, that 4 years is fine. And my senior year, I spent most of my senior year at the Cleveland Playhouse. I was a guinea pig from the speech and theater department. I went to the Cleveland Playhouse as an intern, worked on shows, and lo and behold, they hired me after I graduated. So I was one of those few people that had a job in their field after graduation. But I did take full advantage of my liberal arts degree. That's what we got at the College of Wooster. I did not want to be somebody who was 106 years old, sitting in a wheelchair or a swing out in the back porch thinking, gee, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have done that. So I took full advantage of it, and I've done several things in my life. At the Cleveland Playhouse, we worked on a show that was supposed to go to Broadway, and the producer said, I want you to go with the show. So I moved to New York, called my parents and said, hey, I moved, want to know my new address. And it was West 57th Street, New York City. And my parents said, yeah, they kind of realized I was going to be doing something like that. Of course, shows don't last, so I had to find something to do, so I became a film and television agent and did that for about 11 years. I ran a TV department at a modeling agency, and we were the 4th largest modeling agency in the world. When our boss died, he gave the company to 4 of us. I thought I would stay there for a while, but then I realized he didn't give that to me so I would stay there. He gave that to me to say thank you for what you've done. So I took that money and bought a house just a little bit north of Manhattan where I had a yard because I had a couple of dogs and I wanted them to have a good life. After a while, I decided that I was going to change careers, and I went into veterinary medicine. I went to pre-med at Columbia. I think Columbia just had to see College of Wooster, and they said, okay, you're in. So I went pre-med at Columbia, and then afterwards I was accepted at the University of Illinois and a vet school in Grenada, one of the islands, and decided, gee, I'm in my 30s. I probably will pay this off by the time I'm 200. So I thought, well, I think I'm going to go backwards, become a veterinary technician because that's more hands-on. I don't have to worry about getting insurance. Veterinarians will take care of that. And I really wanted more hands-on with the pets. So I went to a community college, graduated first in my class in veterinary medicine, and did my training at the Animal Medical Center in Manhattan, which is the largest animal hospital in the world. And stayed there for several years, and then decided that there is life outside the city. Since I lived outside the city, it was quite a commute to come in. It would take about an hour and a half to commute in, and it's only 15 minutes away, 15 miles away. But so I decided, no, I'll do something else. And I got a job at an animal hospital about 2 miles from where my house was, and stayed there for about 15 years. One of the doctors that I worked with said, boy, you're really pretty cool under pressure, Pam. Did you ever think about going into being an EMT? You know, you really are good with people, and you're good with any kind of emergency. And I did. That was my specialty, was emergency medicine. So I thought, this would be my way of giving back to the community a little bit. So I joined the ambulance corps, became an EMT. After some training, it took a little while, but people eventually graduate. It's a tough course. It has to be tough, but you're working with people. You're saving people's lives. I absolutely loved doing that more than almost anything else in my entire life. Helping people there's nothing better, as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely nothing better. Dr. Schwab was one of the owners of the animal hospital, and she's the one that kind of suggested maybe I go on and do this. So I did, and it was a great way to give back to the community. I also joined a federal program, of which I'm still a part of, which used to be called FEMA, F-E-M-A, but to us is a four-letter word. So it was changed. We're no longer under Homeland Security, which is what FEMA is. They switched us to another part of the government program, which is human health and health and human services, which is where we should have been all along. I'm still in that program. I'm packed all the time. My team is one of the #1 teams in the United States. I still work out of New York with that team, mainly because not only am I listed as an EMT, but I'm also listed as veterinary medicine and as a pharmacy technician, and I'm also, I forgot to tell you, an ultrasound tech. I want to cover everything I can in my life. So there's only about 13 people in the country that are cross-listed. So if any emergency happens, like a hurricane, fire, tornado, anything like that, where the superstructure of a hospital is jeopardized, then we're sent in. And having more hats to wear, then the better my chances of being called in to work and to help, even if it's another team to backfill another team. My first hurricane that I went to was Victor down in Florida. That area was completely wiped out, if you remember. I think that was 2005. Since then, I've been to Katrina, Floyd, and Rita. Nice names, very nasty girls and boys. But working in those environments, we work 24 hours sometimes. We work, on a weekly average, you work about 76 hours a night. You learn how to change your underwear in your sleeping bag because you're sleeping with about 50 of your closest friends in a big tent. 5-minute showers, cold showers, 5 minutes. Learn how to wash your hair and do anything else you have to do in 5 minutes. We eat RMEs, which are meals ready to eat that the government, the soldiers have in Afghanistan. They're terrible. Some of them are okay, sort of, but they're very high caloric, and so you only eat like a portion of your meal. We had to be self-sufficient for 3 days as far as food and water are concerned, so that's always packed with us as well. And I just love being on that team. I can't wait. As soon as a warning goes out, then I'm the first one to respond and say, I'm ready to go, I'm packed to go, I'm ready to go. So hopefully, we don't want anything to happen where people are hurt, but we still are chomping at the bit to go work. We're kind of adrenaline junkies, I guess is the best way to put it. So are EMTs and so are the firemen. We're adrenaline junkies. You say it's hours of boredom and seconds of excitement, but you live off your adrenal glands, you really do. In 9/11, I was in surgery at the animal hospital. I was the head technician, head nurse, and I was in surgery, and our head boss was the surgeon, and his wife came in and said that the World Trade Center had been hit by a plane. And we thought, just like anybody else who wasn't watching the news, that it was probably a Piper Cub that lost their bearings or whatever. And we kept on working. And then all of a sudden she came in crying and said that a second plane had hit the second tower, and that this was not a mistake. This was 757s or whatever. I can't remember the size of the planes, but this was not an accident. Well, being captain of my corps, I always kept my radio with me, and the tone went out. So I left immediately, had another nurse take my place, and went to our ambulance corps. We decided that each town would send one bus or one ambulance, and that we would go down in a convoy. We filled our ambulances up with water, We didn't know what else to fill up. Our ambulances are always stocked anyway with anything we might need. We filled up with water and oxygen and left, and just hoped for the best. When we got to New York City, they stationed us over on the west side of Manhattan, where a lot of the piers are. I don't know if anybody's been to New York City. You've got to go. Put that on your list. You got to go to New York. It is a great town. It's my favorite place to be. And we waited for a while. Quite a few ambulances were there. We had to check in, give our name, our social security number. They stamped our picture, and we waited. And it was about 7 o'clock at night. We got there about 9 o'clock in the morning. It was shortly after this had happened. And at 7 o'clock at night, over the loudspeaker, somebody who was in charge of emergency services called my name and called another guy from Spring Valley. His name was Rick, and he had been a policeman in New York City for a number of years. And we were called to be the first ambulance in. The government knew right away who we were. They did a background check very fast and knew that I had lived in the city for about 20 years and that Rick was a policeman. So we were the first ambulance to go. They told us that we would probably be going to the morgue, which was over on the east side of Manhattan, and bringing bodies back to probably put on barges and take them to Staten Island, where they were going to try to piece together whatever they could. And, of course, help with anybody that we could find. They told us that we would be several checkpoints on the way, because nobody knew what was going on. At our second checkpoint, they said, "You're going down to ground zero." And Rick and I looked at each other and went, "Okay." Took a deep breath, and he was driving. We got down there, and we had no idea where we were. I've got a pretty good sense of direction, and so does Rick. We got down there. We did have one man that we transported to a hospital, St. Vincent's Hospital, which isn't even there anymore. And Rick and I both looked at each other, and he said, "Which way do we go?" It was a completely foreign land, and you could not get your bearings anywhere, anyway. By this time, nightfall had started to come. The streets were, well, let's just show them a picture. Is it okay if I, okay.
Want me to do it?
This is kind of the bottom. Where this red vehicle is, of course that wasn't there at the time, this is where our ambulance was stationed. This earth mover is the biggest, I've seen earth movers before around this area where there's construction. Those earth movers that I see around here are about 1/4 the size of this earth mover. It was huge, and the streets were lined with them. I'm assuming that the Corps of Engineers brought all this big material, these big machines in to start moving things around. You can still see a little bit of smoke. I'm going to move this up and down. When I was on the bucket brigade, I was on this landing up here. And the bucket brigade was just what it is. You grab things, buckets, and just hand it to the next person, and that bucket would go on. Grab another bucket and do the same thing. The first night that I was there, all the grooves of my boots were melted, as were the firemen were all like that as well, and the other EMTs. This, unfortunately, even today, is the background of all my dreams. I cannot get this out of my mind. I'm starting now to have some good dreams. Things are happy, but the background is always this. And I'm sure that my colleagues have the same thing going on.
What is that building that's there?
This is the second tower.
No, the one that there's still
Right here,
something
this is
remaining,
one
yes.
of the banks, that everything's blown out. I mean, they've demolished this building. But everything was, there's nothing, I mean, it was
Yes.
a ghost town. And I don't think you could even see people. They're just very tiny. They're like dots. That's how big these earth movers were.
What is that blue tinge on
Blue tinge?
Yeah.
Smoke.
it? Smoke, okay.
It's smoke. That's what we were breathing. God knows what.
And what day was this?
This was the day of and the day after. Yes. Yeah, by this time it's probably about 9 o'clock. But, and the lights were just from lights that they brought in on stands, those big lights. Believe it or not, my cell phone worked for a little while. I was able to just call my parents and let them know I was okay, and Mom said, I just knew it. I just knew it. That was her response. And Dad just said, I'm proud of you, take care of yourself. So, I guess what really means, well, let's see, before I left the hospital, one of the doctors who's a partner at the hospital started to cry, and I thought it was because her mom worked in this district, and she was crying because of that. I didn't realize until afterwards when I came back that she was crying for me. And I kept saying, don't worry, I'll find your mom, I'll find your mom. And it wasn't that at all. She was worried about what else is going to happen if I was going to be in the middle of it. And if I did, so be it. I did lose friends. I mean, to the rest of the world, it's like this has happened and it's terrible. And to us, it's how dare you do this to our city, to my city. This is where I lived. This is where we lived. This is our city. If it happened in Cleveland, you guys would all feel the same way. But it was in New York, and I know it's a little foreign to you, especially if you've never been there. But it's how dare you, our city, my city. One of my neighbors was lost. She and her husband had 3 or 4 pizza joints all around the county, Patricia's. Remember Patricia's? Okay, it was named after the wife, Patricia. Patricia was killed that day. One that really, I get goosebumps, what really hit home for me was there's a fellow that had worked at our animal hospital during the summer and during holidays. His name was Wells Carruthers. I don't know if there's a book out about him, but he's known as the man with the red bandana. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Okay. Tom, I think I might have, where's Tom? There you are. I might have talked about him in the first class.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
He was one of our kennel boys, and he helped me in the back of the hospital when I was pulling blood or something like that. And he was always, he wasn't an EMT, but he was a volunteer fireman. Back up just a little bit. In New York City, the EMTs and the firemen are all paid, and they're all part of one another. The EMTs are part of the fire department. You get outside the city and all the other counties, EMS and fire are all volunteer. Nobody's paid. Everybody's a volunteer. And I think we do a better job because we are volunteer. Wells was one of the volunteer firemen. He always wore a red bandana in his back pocket because no matter where he was, if something was needed, he'd use that bandana as a mask. He saved at least 16 people that we know of, maybe more, that day from the first tower. He saved them and got them to safety. He went into the second tower just as it crashed, and he lost his life. To this day, every 9/11, Every 9/11, I always wear a bandana in my back pocket. And we all do the same thing at the animal hospital, every single 9/11. He was 24 years old, and I can't tell you if I've ever met a more giving person in my entire life. He was just so special. He really was.